I believe we need a new category of crime. Um, Attacking people as part of a gang. As it stands, in this country, grievous bodily assault, common assault, um, public misdemeanors, affray, those sort of things are criminal offences. But unless I'm mistaken, and I would like to be corrected on this, I would like someone to point out, say, actually, Nathan, this does exist. But as far as I know, there is no specific offence in statute dealing with the nature of a gang, a group of people attacking an individual. And I'm thinking very specifically here because there has been a number of cases. I read a disturbing case a few days ago in the Sunderland Echo about, excuse me, it wasn't in the Sunderland Echo, I think it was on the local website, but basically, yeah, it was on the Metro website actually. Um, a 10-year-old schoolboy was viciously assaulted by a gang of teenagers. Um, and he was left in hospital apparently. We hear all the time of these sort of cases of a gang targeting an individual, sometimes up to 20 strong, week, I would say. And I really do believe that there needs to be a specific offence over this, reflecting the particularly cowardly nature of this sort of attack. Now, any assault is bad, but I do think there is something particularly evil about this sort of attack. I mean, if you get someone who assaults a stranger for no reason, they should face harsh penalties. But if you get a gang doing it, I think that should be harsher because it's a particularly, like I say, the nature of it, it's strength in numbers. It doesn't take a genius to work out that that is a particularly disgusting thing to do. So if I were a judge, I would get the defendant S plural to look at me in the face, and I would say to them, "You are a card. I'm publicly calling you a card. You need to be treated like a card." And this is significant. This isn't just tough rhetoric. I think it matters because in gang culture, the whole thing is about being a man, about, oh, you can only be a real man if you stab someone, if you rape a girl, you know, this sort of toxic gang culture, which in my opinion is promoted by grime music and particularly by drill music. I would like to see drill music banned. I don't think it's an art form. I think it's criminal thugs literally promoting crime. That's what I believe it is. I do not accept it as a representation of art. And I think, the PC crowd really need to wake up. I hate drill music. I think it's absolute poison. I would like to see it banned. And I would rather be falsely smeared as a racist for saying that because it's popular with young black youths in London, rather than see a situation where we put political correctness ahead of public safety. There needs to be a candid discussion about the role that drill music has in promoting gang activity. I'm not saying it's the whole thing, but I do think it's a big part of it. And then when these grime stars get the likes of Stormzy get up and say, "Oh, you can't blame the art," they're influential. I'd like to see them take some damn responsibility. They may not be personally responsible for example, knife crime, but if someone like Stormzy's always blaming the government for everything, there are legitimate issues about Tory cuts. There are, but what I really take issue with some of these so-called grime stars is they won't look at themselves. They won't look at what this sort of music is doing. And I just think it's bullshit to say that it's just an art form. They know full well that there is postcode turf wars going on with this. So yeah, I would like to see heavy, heavy restrictions on drill music. if not outright banned. And if they whine about it, then the onus is on them to change their attitude. You cannot tell me that a group of masked teenagers or young men brandishing knives, literally talking about who they're going to stab, you cannot tell me that is just an art form. Um, so it's poison, and I think we need to seriously look at that. But there's other things as well, like I say, sentencing. I urge you, if you feel as strongly as I do about the subject, contact the Sentencing Committee of England and Wales, or if you're in Scotland or Northern Ireland, their sister organisations, its sister organisations. The Sentencing Committee of England and Wales are the people who are responsible for setting sentencing. They're unelected bureaucrats. When I phoned them up, they said they were updating their website, but I do believe that there is a lot of serious issues with that. One of the things they claim that they're all about is increasing public confidence in the justice system. That's almost laughable. These are the people responsible for setting sentencing guidelines, which is the guidelines that judges use. Although I still think a lot of judges won't issue the maximum sentence that they have. So I see it as a joint responsibility between judges and the sentencing committee. The point is, these are unelected bureaucrats. They're very strong on self-congratulation with that website. Like they'll say, "Oh, we actually look, we are issuing sentencing which actually reflects what the public thinks," and they have these little "you be the judge" formats, in which yes, some cases what the public is sort of voting, it's like an interactive thing, does reflect what the actual outcome was. But the fact remains, for example, when it comes to youth crime, the policy at the moment is to focus on rehabilitation before punishment. But this is kind of nonsense because if the fact has happened, you can't say, oh, let's rehabilitate them after the fact. I mean, if if a 16-year-old in a gang lays into someone, stabs them, or even stamps on the head, leaves them with brain damage in a hospital, you cannot tell me, oh, well, now let's try and rehabilitate them, try to get them into the. Um, in my opinion, someone like that needs to be absolutely scared straight. In my opinion, I would fully favor military camps or something for a criminal like that. I don't think that you could take a softly, softly approach. And as it stands, criminals under the age of 18, offenders under the age of 18, that's precisely what happens. In the worst cases, they will get a custodial sentence, but they'll be out in 1 or 2 years. So it doesn't reflect the gravity of the crime. It makes my blood boil. I want to see these swaggering thugs held to account. I want to see useless judges held to account. I feel very, very strongly about this, and I'm not the only one. And those liberal minded people, sometimes they're youth workers, sometimes they're others, who say, oh, punishment is punitive. It's not just about the practical outcome, that's not the only issue. It's also about right and wrong, fairness, something they fail to understand. That is to say, if someone is terrorizing society, fairness dictates they're held to account. Now, I don't think we have the worst justice system in the world, but I do think that the establishment that runs the justice system, that is the sentencing committee and judges, they don't really understand the true depth of public anger. If they did, if they did, they would understand the urgency of changing sentencing. I would like to see a situation, I think it's the situation in Australia, where there is minimum sentencing, where judges cannot issue a sentence softer than a particular red line. So if you have a weak judge, they have no choice. They have to issue. Like, say, for example, I'll give an example of this, just as a loose sort of scenario. This isn't actual legislation, but as a scenario, let's say you have a gang attack. I think that's a particularly, like I say, evil, destructive crime. Because obviously, if you have more people laying into someone, it's going to do more damage than one person laying into someone, right? So let's say an absolute minimum of depending on the extent of the injuries and the damage to the victim, they could suffer post-traumatic stress. They almost certainly will. But let's say, for example, they've been there for brain damage. Then I would say, if you had an absolute minimum of 10 years for the ringleaders and say 5 years for the others, then minimum. Then a weak judge who would want to give them 2 years can't do that. They just can't do it because the option isn't there. And if they did, they would be found, they would be struck off for actually, don't know what the term would be, malpractice or. You see, as it stands, the only way to hold judge to account is by actually, if they have been not for incompetence, not for weak sentencing. You can't hold them to account for that. The only way to hold a judge to account in this country is if they've done something misconduct. That's the word I'm looking for. For example, if they've I don't know had a relationship with a juror or something like that, that's got no relevance to sentencing. Well, it could, I guess, but the point I'm making is if you feel angry about sentencing as it stands, judges can't be held to account. Where the extent of public anger is such that it makes the tabloids and makes the national press, the judge might be named and shamed. I think they should be, but they'll still keep their job. So I think it comes down to the legal profession to look at themselves and say, are we really accountable to the public? Really? Because as it stands, I am not, by the way, proposing that judges are elected. I could see issues with that because if you had areas of say, a conservative Muslim population, then you'd end up getting Sharia judges. Um, so there could be some inherent problems with directly electing judges. However, I do think that the public should be far, far more empowered to hold weak judges to account. Say, we do not think this reflects the gravity of the crime. Can we have this case reviewed for overdue leniency? As it stands, it's far too. That is not a straightforward process. It can be done, but it's not straightforward in a way that it should be. It's not transparent in a way that it should be. So I'd like to see a lot more transparency. I'd like to see sentences that actually reflect the gravity of the crime. And I know a lot of people would. But yeah, I want to see this kind of crime, gang attacks, treated with the absolute revulsion that it deserves. Very occasion, I'll just make this caveat. I'm pretty critical of judges in this country. I don't want to say anything I've said, but occasionally you do get justified outcomes, such as the case of that little girl, Alicia McFall, the little 6-year-old who was raped and murdered in Scotland. The offender was 17. He got a pretty long sentence, custodial sentence. Now, that's a rare occasion where I think the judge got it right. And in Scotland, unlike England and Wales, trials can be televised. At least that one was. It was filmed. And the judge didn't mince his words about what he thought of this particular crime. I think he gave him 28 years. So even if he gets early release, that would be still well over 20 years. So it's a rare occasion where the sentence actually is a bit more reflective. And that's, of a young offender. But it's a particularly evil crime. It sickened the country, actually, that one. This was 2 years ago. And it was in a remote community as well, the Isle of Bute. So that obviously has a deeper impact. So I want the legal profession, that is the sentencing council, judges in general, to understand that there is a need to have a specific offence for this kind of crime, so they can sentence them for that kind of crime rather than just, well, it's assault. It needs to be like, I would call it something like, you have been found guilty of a gang attack, that is being part of a gang that has attacked an individual. And I say, name and shame them, throw the book at them. We also need to change this ridiculous situation that 16-year-old defendants can't be named. I mean, why the hell not? If someone is capable of stabbing a stranger to death for no other reason than they disrespected them, they should damn well be named in a court of law. If for no other reason than to keep the public safe, so they know to look out for this individual. I mean, I think there's a lot that needs to change drastically. It's not punitive and it is not about trying to sound tough. It's about basic right and wrong. And those of a liberal disposition who think, oh no, we can't, it's too harsh. It's punishment for the sake of it. No, it's not. It's punishment because it's right. At least that's the way it should be. You know, as far as I'm concerned, they've had their way for long enough. They wouldn't see it that way. They'd want it a lot more soft. They'd want a lot more leniency. They'd want a lot more rehabilitation. But let me ask you, what does rehabilitation do? Well, young offenders literally laugh at it. Unless it is scaring them straight, unless it scares them, then it's useless. I'm not interested in rehabilitation that says, oh, well, we'll just, gently, please don't be so naughty. You need to do this. Don't put the brick into that shopkeeper's window. Don't assault random strangers. Please don't do that. It's far, far too soft. Something has fundamentally changed in this country. Although we have a low homicide rate, we still have a serious problem with antisocial behaviour. And I think it's always been there on some level, but I do think there is a desensitized thing that's going on now with youth crime, youth gangs in particular. Because where you find sentences that are a bit more appropriate with the sentencing, it tends to be for adult offenders. Say, I don't know, a 35 or 40-year-old man has assaulted someone and left them, in critical condition. They will get a longer sentence. Let's say you have a drug dealer or other such crimes. They tend to be a bit more reflective of the gravity of the crimes. But what really I think needs to improve is the response to the worst sort of youth crime. No, I'm not saying that just throw all young offenders in jail. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there needs to be much tougher penalties for those sort of crimes. There has to be. As it stands, it's pathetic. And the only reason is because of their age. But to me, saying, oh, let's focus on rehabilitation before they get worse, how much worse can you get? That's the point. The fact has already happened. So I think rehabilitation only worked for example, non-violent crimes like shoplifting. I think when violence has already happened, I don't think there should be a tap on the wrist. And the sentencing committee claims rehabilitation isn't the soft option. Tell that to victims of crime. Tell that to people who have suffered at their hands, and they're seeing the perpetrators walk free. As far as most of them are concerned, yes, it is the soft option.